Hey guys, welcome to the Smart Venture Podcast. In each episode, we're going to have conversations with some of the top investors, superstar founders, as well as well-known tech company executives in Silicon Valley. We'll have a coffee chat with them to learn their way of thinking and actionable tips on how they build or invest in a successful company. Before we start our show today, I want to make sure the listener, aka you, understand that everything a person say on the podcast only reflects hers or his own opinion, not the show or the company they work at. Our guest today is a managing partner at NFX. NFX is a seed and Series A venture firm based in San Francisco. Prior to NFX, he founded Trulia. He raised funding from top venture firms like Sequoia and Accel, and eventually led the company to a successful IPO. In 2015, Trulia merged with Zillow, and he served on the Zillow's board of directors. His name is Pete Flint. This episode is the first part of the conversation with Pete. We'll focus on how Pete started his career in tech, important qualities to have as a founder, as well as more personal development journey as an investor and a leader. Welcome to the show, Pete.
My pleasure, Grace. Great to be on. Great to see you today and hear you as well.
Pete, you studied physics at Oxford, work at big tech company like IBM. You have investing background at JP Morgan. You have PM and growth experiences at startups. And eventually, you founded your own company, Trulia. After the company exit, you become an investor. You really accomplish everything someone in Silicon Valley aspires to do. Today, I want to hear your end of the story on how you grew up and how did you get to where you are today.
Yeah, of course. I guess so. I grew up in England, and my parents were a university professor and a high school teacher. So it was like mandatory to be good at school and to get the grades. And I guess at high school I was quite at the time I was quite into computers. That like my father would bring back the early kind of the Apple computers and was interested in computers. So when I before high school and then starting university, I took a gap year and worked for a while at IBM. This was in '92. This is when IBM was the sort of dominant the thing, that sort of Google or the Facebook or the Microsoft at the time. And then some travel as well. And so really that, I was just fascinated by technology and computers. And then while I was at undergrad, a lot of people from my university went on to investment banking or consulting and said, let me try that for a summer just to see what it's like. And I ended up taking doing an internship at JP Morgan. And like a lot of these things, they put the summer intern on the kind of like the sort of like new exciting thing that the old guys didn't understand, which was at the time was the internet. So the summer of 1995, the internet, it was sort of the starting line of the modern internet. So it was a summer when Netscape went public, and Netscape was the really the kind of the original browser that enabled people to get onto the internet, and stock doubled or something. It was just like an incredibly sort of exciting time where finance kind of met technology. And I kind of realized two things during that summer and became sort of a fast expert, I guess, relative to a lot of my peers in the internet. Realized two things. So one is like, I never wanted to work in an investment bank because I just didn't like the culture, the environment, the bureaucracy, the scale of it. So I never wanted to, I didn't want to work in an investment bank, but I did want to work in the internet. And so as it happened, the next, I was doing a lot of summer internships to pay for university and to get some work experience. The next summer, I wrote to every single internet company in the UK,
wow,
of which there were 17.
Okay, I was expecting the 2,000 emails.
Yeah, I mean, there were lists of internet companies and the sort of the equivalent of the phone book. And so I wrote to all of them, and for another summer internship. So a company offered me a summer internship, and I worked there for summer. And it's just a crazy group of hackers and programmers and designers, and just a really interesting group of people. And then I was captivated. So they were building websites for big corporates, but just a really cool group of people. And then I kind of sort of went from there into some people I met there essentially went on to start a company called lastminute.com. So I joined them as a founding team member back in 1998, which was amazing. And that company scaled and also went public 18 months after launch, which was a thing back then. And then navigated the dot-com collapse, and then I left in 2003, and the company was ultimately acquired by Travelocity for over $1 billion in 2005.
One of the really interesting things you've mentioned is back in time, investment banking was a quote unquote safe choice, but you end up joining a startup. You were taking a lot of risks. Back in time, why did you decide to join a startup? What was the career plan you had for yourself back then? In terms of picking the startup to join, what do you see in the startup founding team?
Yeah, I guess firstly, I guess the way that I think about sort of career opportunities is one, when you're early on in your career, you really have very little. I have a family now and a mortgage and stuff like that, and so it's a bit harder to kind of take some of that risk. I guess the real decision for me was to really focus on two things. So one is find the rocket ship that you want to be part of. And back then the internet was growing at an insane rate. And so find the rapidly growing rocket ship that you want to jump on. And then I think, you may not necessarily pick the right company, but you pick a rapidly growing industry that opens up so many other opportunities. Two is to find an amazing manager. Find someone that you just love working for, that can be your mentor. I see so many kind of brilliant people that don't necessarily have that, a mentor manager that can help navigate their career. And, following people and momentum, often works out extremely well. So the reason I joined Last Minute was because the founders, Brent and Martha, were just, exceptional individuals that I wanted to spend time with, and the internet was just literally exploding at that time.
You brought up two really good points here. One is to find a rocket ship to jump on, and another one is find yourself an amazing mentor manager. Let's break it down a little bit. Back in time, the internet was a rocket ship. In today's world, what industry do you see as a rocket ship?
Oh, what are the rocket? There are so many rocket ships that's sort of exploding. I think there's there's a lot of different areas. I think if I was to what springs to mind is the intersection of biology and computer science. NFX, we have a company in our portfolio called Mammoth Biosciences, which is the technology that they're building off is CRISPR technology, and it's it's the pace of progress and innovation in that category is unbelievable, and the potential to transform our lives is incredible. So there's a raw sort of technology that's kind of exploding incredibly quickly. So that's probably the sort of one thing that isn't sort of in the computer science, traditional computer science world, but that seems to be a sort of really interesting area. Another really interesting area is obviously AI, and I think that is you start to look at charts and the same way you saw this exponential growth in internet usage, you're starting to see that happening in AI in a very real way. And I think that that AI has obviously been around for for decades, but the actual the ability for it to the foundation, the data, the models, the algorithms, and just the sort of the capabilities mean that is feels like it's going to impact our lives in really meaningful ways. So those are two different, but I think really interesting rocket ships right now.
Yeah, so biotech and AI both have many subsectors. We don't just have 17 companies anymore. If you're selecting a startup to join today, what are some specific qualities would you look for? Also, what qualities do you look for in founders or managers if you are choosing someone who will be mentoring you?
I mean, the companies that we like to back and the founders we like to back, there's no sort of formula for kind of what that looks like. I probably would, if I was to sort of drill it down into a couple of things. So one is the ability, one is just an individual, group of individuals that have a remarkable insight. Startups just, by sort of design are almost sort of impossibility. Like there should be an incumbent that should be doing this. So what is the thing that the founder sees that everyone else doesn't see? And that could be born through personal experience. It could be born through kind of deep study. It could be just born by pure chance or brilliance. So what is the insight that this person has? Second is a incredible persistence. And that can be sometimes hard to kind of like figure out. So, people that have done really interesting things in their prior career, you can demonstrate kind of elements of just massive persistence. So whether that's being, an incredible athlete, or whether that is winning chess tournaments, or whether that is, leading political campaigns as a volunteer to do that. So what are the sort of incredible kind of areas of persistence that individuals have? And the third piece is to be an incredible storyteller. If you think about, sometimes you think of a startup as the ability to marshal resources that you don't otherwise have. And that means convincing people to join you, convincing people to give you money, convincing people to partner with you, convincing people to pay you. It's like you need to be an incredible storyteller and to have that narrative. And so that's, if I was to pick on three things, I think those, the insight, the persistence, and the storytelling are really critical.
I like the three qualities you've mentioned. When it comes to building Trulia, back in time, when you were pitching investors, how do you demonstrate the qualities? What were your unique insight back then? How do you demonstrate your persistence? And what make you a good storyteller? In terms of building these skills, what were some actions you took to gain the sales skill or unique insights?
Well, I don't know. There's a lot to unpack there, and it's hard to sort of truly evaluate yourself back then as a 20-year-old. I guess, I mean, firstly, the insight that I had was, I moved from UK to the US and was thinking of where should I live? I had to find off-campus housing, and I guess the core insight was that, the problem that I faced was I went to all these different crazy resources, whether that's Craigslist or whether that's newspapers or whether that's real estate agents to get this information. But why isn't there a kind of like, an online consumer-driven service like lastminute.com or like Expedia, which enabled you to go in and find all the information and, choose the product that you want to buy? It was locked up behind these databases that only real estate agents could access. And so it just seemed like this is inevitable, particularly for buying real estate, which is the biggest single financial decision of your life. So that was the insight I had. And then the sort of at the high level, and then the other insights were really born out of my experience at last minute. Like, how do you navigate the traditional industry players and bring them on in a successful way? How do you scale and grow the business? I ran growth at last minute. And so how do you bring on consumers? How do you build technology? So those were kind of insights I had back then. I guess the sort of storytelling, it's hard to tell. I think I was, I think in some ways, doing physics as a sort of undergraduate degree enabled me to understand complicated concepts, I guess. And then, my upbringing as son of educators enabled me to explain those concepts to other people. So I think that, I guess that storytelling was a part of that. But I think, to be honest, it's just a hell of a lot of practice. Practice and practice and practice makes you build that muscle.
I love what you said about practicing the skills by taking actions. Going back to personal development, compared to your peers at Oxford who studied physics or folks who you've worked at the same job when you're younger, you're pretty successful than a lot of people. What do you see are the 3 qualities that you have that other people don't that make you more successful?
Well, I think one is luck. So I think I've just been incredibly lucky, which is, growing up in a stable country in the UK and great family and timing. And so I think there's just a very, high degree of luck, which is, I'm very conscious of. I guess if I was to think about the other elements would be, I think there's a degree of risk taking, and I sort of and there's I guess calculated risk taking. Going back into the ability to the decision not to go and join an investment bank or IBM or consultancy out of undergrad, but to join an internet startup. And no one was joining internet startups back in the 90s. That was, and I think that I think that element of risk taking is the downside is very limited, the upside is enormous. And so I think, much like in venture capital, you're investing in startups, you can only lose one time your money, but the upside is enormous. I think the same is true as individuals investing in startups, just finding the great team and joining them. And then I guess, I think probably just the sort of persistence that I have. I think I've always been very persistent as an individual and competitive as well, which helped me to be successful.
Speaking of being persistent, founding a successful startup normally comes with a lot of setbacks. Can you tell us a time that you faced a challenge and how did you solve it?
I think it's interesting that the experience that the experience at lastminute.com was just incredibly illustrative of how to navigate really challenging times. And this was a time when sort of there was no blogs about how to build internet startups. There was no podcasts. There was no information. And there were periods of time when things would happen. And 2 kind of come to mind. One is just a core kind of database failure where the site was down, for hours and then, almost days. And, watching the team, see this problem and then figure out how are we going to get around this problem, go over this problem, go under this problem, go through this problem, and seeing a kind of group of people and working with a group of people where just there is an obstacle here, which is the database is down, and then finding, every single way around this problem, calling up this, CTO of the database company in the US at midnight, all these sort of things that we were doing. and we kind of saw this problem and went through it. And I think that was just a just a incredible example of just how we'd seen overcoming problems. The other thing that comes to mind is really one of the sort of defining moments of that company was how to navigate September the 11th. So you imagine a travel company in 9/11. It was just a terrible time. You sort of digest a human tragedy, and then you think about, okay, how this is going to impact the travel industry, hotels, and obviously the sort of industry was decimated. But at the same time, the focus for the company was how do we turn this crisis into an opportunity? How do we take this problem that's facing the industry and use it to our advantage? Be aggressive when other people are timid. And what happened at the time was that the suppliers had massive amounts of excess inventory. Consumers were confused. They wanted information. They also were poor. They wanted deals. And so creating this kind of matching or marketplace between those two was the opportunity. And of course, the parallels, happened again in 2008 in real estate, where there was this, massive dislocation in the market. And I think we're seeing it right now in 2020. You've got seen this like massive sort of economic biological shock, which is creating these crisis points in many industries, and startups are moving in to see these points of lack, where there's a lack of equilibrium, and using that as an opportunity to find a wedge in an industry and build a meaningful business.
Absolutely. I like what you said about navigating hard time by not giving up, as well as being proactive and taking actions on opportunities that other people don't see. Translate to today's situation. What do you think are the big opportunities for startups to take actions on?
Well, I think there's like this whole range of opportunities. I think if you think for the high level, then the future is digital and the future is virtual. And so technology entrepreneurs have like this amazing gift, plus talent got a lot cheaper. And there's, plenty of capital and talent around. So, I think this is, going to be sort of one of the defining moments of the technology industry. Clearly, it's going to be a defining moment of our economy, but it's just incredible, the transformation. So if I was to think about where we see opportunities today for startups, a number of themes come to mind. So one is the transformation of labor. So that you've seen this sort of mass unemployment and then rehiring, but you've seen it happen in very different ways. So there are many less baristas going on, but kind of many more DoorDash drivers, and so there are there's going to be changes in every single industry as individuals look to find different types of employment. So we see massive transformations in labor markets, and then technology to help those companies find labor, or to help individuals to improve their skills and change their skills to kind of to find opportunities. So labor marketplaces is one key area. Another key area is the transformation of the supply chain. So both with sort of geopolitical risk and in China and other parts of the world, both to like how people are, how people are rethinking where they're purchasing. We think there's transformation in supply chain, which is such a massive industry. Gaming and entertainment, usage has gone up dramatically, and if you look at where there's many opportunities for startups, there's the massive opportunities in gaming. And just takes an example is to look at the variance in app store rankings from year to year. And if you look at those sort of app store rankings in a multi-year time frame, The biggest changes generally happen in the gaming industry. Games come up, games come down, games come up, games down. And that creates many more opportunities for new startups to enter, as opposed to, say, social networking or transportation or real estate. Those apps are actually, are very, very persistent. I think there's going to be some. Those are some examples about where we see opportunities right now for startups. And one other example would be e-commerce. I think it's it's a mature category, but the market's just got so much bigger. And so what are the new tools and new services that can happen there?
All right, that's all we have for today. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Smart Venture Podcast. In the next episode, we'll focus on Pete's career journey as a founder and an investor. Don't forget to come back on Wednesday for the second part of the conversation with Pete. If you like it, please leave us a quick review and hit subscribe so you don't miss any tip from the experts. If you want to receive our updates, please leave your email at smartventurepod.com. If you want to connect with me, all my socials are at Grace Gong GG. Besides LinkedIn, it's just Grace Gong. I'd love to connect with you and let me know your thought about the show. Now you can also listen to Smart Venture Podcast on YouTube. Go to smartventurepod.com, click the YouTube link on the top banner. Don't forget to hit subscribe and smash the like button. See you next time.